Borderlands. Ever played it? You know, the video game? Yeah, we're talking about that Borderlands. Anybody who has played the Borderlands games for any real length of time will know that these games have never been particularly deep from the standpoint of gameplay, or story, or writing, or dialogue, or strategy. Or, yeah, basically anything, really. These are all games that I have played a billion times, and yet, if you put me on the spot and asked me what was so great about the Borderlands series, I don't think I could give you a really concrete answer. It's as though whenever I played these games, I entered into a trance-like state where I didn't really comprehend what I was looking at, and I was just pressing buttons like some kind of monkey in a lab. Now, some of you might think that that could describe every single video game ever made, but that's not true. You need to have a very high IQ in order to understand Earthworm Jim 3D. The humor is extremely subtle, and without the prerequisite knowledge of earthworms and refrigerators, it'll probably fly over your stupid little head. On the surface, the Borderlands games have everything. They got guns, they got grenades, they got black people, there's woman people, there's boobs people, little people, LGBTKFC. That's lasers, guns, bullets, and Terramorphous, the shitty raid boss that made me rip out my hair when I was 15. All of these things should add up to a good game, but as I've gotten older and my sensibilities have gotten more refined by prestigious high art games such as GTA 5, it's gotten very hard for me to call the Borderlands games good, and at this point, these games are decidedly not good in my eyes. I came to this conclusion shortly after beating Borderlands 3, which is way longer than the other games and made me want to drink. When I first played it last year, I put like 6 hours into it over the course of a week or so and said, it's more Borderlands. That's cool. And I put it on my top 10 list that year. But the truth of the matter is, it probably wouldn't have made the list if I played more games that year. Now that I've spent like a billion hours beating this game and the bullshit started to set in, I slowly realized that I didn't like this game nearly as much as I thought I did. It ended up feeling very exhausting, and by the end, I just wanted it to be over. As a matter of fact, it made me feel very similarly to the way I felt when I beat another game last year. And that game, of course, was The Witcher 3. Once that domino fell over, I started to entertain the possibility that the games were low-key dog-ass the entire time, and perhaps my nostalgia had been clouding my judgment, and I pretty much confirmed that after I went back and did another playthrough of the previous games. It took me like 7.5 years to figure out that maybe these games weren't all that I thought they were. Here's a little Phantom Beano lore for your ass, okay? I was first introduced to this series when I was like 15 or 16 when they put Borderlands 2 on the PlayStation Plus service for free. I thought it was the best thing in the world, but I mean, I also thought the South Park writers were the greatest thinkers of our generation back then, so yeah, baby Phantom Beano wasn't exactly the smartest boy in the club. The point is, back then, my gaming repertoire was relatively narrow, especially with respect to FPS games, which basically boiled down to Doom on the Super Nintendo, GoldenEye on the N64, and Borderlands 2 running at 23 FPS on a PS3. Borderlands 2 was the only contemporary first-person shooter I had ever really played at the time. To me, that was it. There was no way for FPS games to get better than that, because again, the only things I had to compare it to were crusty-ass Super Nintendo Doom and Golden Boy. But you and I both know that there are plenty of FPS games that are far more engaging, polished, and intricate fundamentally than Borderlands. Of course, since the inception of the Borderlands series, we've had 1.5 billion other FPS games with deeper and more interesting mechanics. The contemporary Doom games have deceptively simple combat. There are a ton of nuances to it between resource management, movement, spatial awareness, which weapons are best for which enemies, and prioritizing which weapons to use or avoid using because you're saving ammo for a certain other enemy. And this is even true of the original games from the 90s. You know, the actual good versions on the PC. Some FPS games have stealth elements. I remember I kept dying in the prison escape mission in GoldenEye, and it turned out it was because this old-ass game from 1997 actually had stealth mechanics. I was supposed to be more aware of sound propagation and things like that in order to avoid alerting the guards and getting Swiss cheesed immediately. There are definitely 1 billion other games that could serve as better examples of this, so if any of you are FPS experts, I strongly encourage encourage you to yell at me in the comments section, but the point is, these games require a degree of strategy to beat, like you always gotta be actively thinking about what you're doing. Now, if you've ever played the Borderlands games, tell me, how much strategy was involved? Were you playing 4D chess? Or perhaps 5D interdimensional transplanetary backgammon? Yeah, probably not. The closest thing I can think of to a Borderlands strategy is letting yourself get killed at a strategic moment where there's an enemy nearby with barely any health so you can get the second wind. Borderlands 3 added this little slide move and ground smash move, but these things ultimately end up adding very little to the game and often have no particularly useful application in combat, and just end up feeling like sprinkles. Like, not even icing on the cake, just sprinkles. I mean, sprinkles aren't even bad per se, but I forget they're even there a lot of the time, right? Like, nobody eats a cupcake and comments on how nice the sprinkles taste, and that's what these moves are. There's no real tactical incentive to using them. It's just, I feel like butt slamming, so I'm gonna do it. I only remember one boss fight where that slide actually came in handy, and it was fucking amazing. But the rest of the time, it's not important at all. The combat encounters in these games do not have deep, thoughtful strategies and typically boil down to just shooting a bunch of guys while they shoot you, and you pray to Lord Jeebus that your bullets kill him before his kill you, except sometimes you can just stand in one spot with a sniper and they'll usually be incapable of winning anyway. But don't worry, because even if he does kill you, you just kill some little insect while in fight for your life and bam, second wind. Unless you fail the second wind because you clip through a wall just barely out of bounds, at which point you lose like $7 and just go back and do it again until you win. Like, dying in this game does not matter at all. So, no movement, no stealth, no real big brain strategy, but, still better than Doom 3 though. So what sets Borderlands apart? Well, it's an RPG, forehead. No, not that kind of RPG, you big stupid idiot. That's the thing, it's an FPS, but you also level up, so what little strategy was involved in the game to begin with disappears if you're a high enough level, and only really exists when fighting enemies that are roughly equal to you, but even then, not super much. Like, it often just devolves into basic bitch bullet sponge bullshit. I think most of the strategy lies in the fact that all the weapons and class mods and grenade mods and shields and guns have different stats and shit, and you have all these class specific perks and whatnot, and they sometimes have status effects that work better on some enemies and worse on others, so that's where most of the strategy is. And I will say that I like that critical hits actually depend on where you shoot the guy instead of just being this RNG, oh well maybe it will, maybe it won't bullshit. In my experience though, it was not often that I had to think very hard about any of that stuff because I just ran in with some high damaging weapon that I found 7 years ago and just kept using that, and that usually worked. Not to mention the fact that the AI in Borderlands is fucking dumber than shit and makes Cyberpunk look like MGS5, so it's not like the enemies are strategizing either. A lot of the things that I'm criticizing Borderlands gameplay loop for were the same things that I said about The Witcher 3. I know it definitely sounds stupid on the surface to compare Borderlands to Witcher 3, but please just hear me out, alright? The gameplay in Witcher 3, to me, felt very shallow. Even though you have all these stats and potions and mechanics and whatnot, every encounter I had with an enemy boiled down to mashing the light attack and then rolling around whenever they attacked me and then doing it again, and the other stuff only made that slightly more efficient in some situations. Then you hoard all the items and the herbs and shit and then sell them just to have barely enough money to upgrade your armor, and the game is basically just 60 hours of doing that. Borderlands gameplay loop is kinda similar. Again, you have the different classes and a billion different guns and upgrade trees, but most of the encounters are the same old song and dance. Looking at it from a third-person perspective, I'm sure it looks kind of intense, but when you actually play it, basically if you have a particular gun, that gun can pretty much be the solution to basically every single problem. I remember I bought this broken-ass Jacobs pistol in Borderlands 3 and it just annihilated everything in my path with no issue for like 38% of the game. But that's enough about the gameplay. Nobody plays games because of the gameplay. Are you stupid? This is the future. People like games for story and writing. We are an elite class of connoisseurs with the absolute most distinguished and refined sensibilities. It's very rare that I hear people write home about the gameplay of Final Fantasy VII as much as the really sad story moments like that cutscene where a certain character stabs another character with a samurai sword, and I'm not saying names, but everyone already had it spoiled for them because they watched those shitty Watch Mojo videos that are like saddest gaming moments of all time. I'm sorry, I'm just really not a Watch Mojo guy. So the story of Borderlands, yeah, it's kinda ass, you know? The overall tone of Borderlands is over-the-top loudmouth lunacy driven by characters who are all out of their fucking minds, which gets less funny as you become an old man like me. The story definitely peaked at Borderlands 2 and just went downhill after that. For the entire series, the writing has ranged from being charmingly cringe-worthy to just being regular cringe. Again, I loved it way more when I was 15, but I also thought Brian and Stewie singing about weed belonged in the goddamn Smithsonian, so again, not reliable. Borderlands has often been revered for its humor, but the number of times I feel like I've seen some variant of the punchline of, "Hi, I'm like a totally psychopathic lunatic murderer that belongs in an institution, but like I'm so quirky though, do you have an Instagram?" Like, I don't know if I'm imagining it, but I feel like every second or third character you meet in these games is some kind of variant of that. I mean, it's either that or it's some big guy going like, "I'm gonna drink shocky milk through your intestines, boy," or something like that. Like, it feels like a lot of the same punchlines over and over and over again, and there's definitely exceptions to this, obviously. That's not literally every single character in the game. Don't be a wise guy here. I ain't saying that. But I am saying that that's a lot of them, or at the very least that they stick out way, way more for me. Handsome Jack was by several magnitudes the best villain in the series, and then they ran out of those pretty quickly. Borderlands 2 had the best writing out of all of them. Like, you can say, "Thank God I'm not Anthony Birch" in the year 2021, and after Googling him for like 3 seconds, I'd probably agree with you, but you cannot deny the fact that he is like 2% better at writing Borderlands than the other guys. By now, based on the title of the video and the fact that I've been shitting on Borderlands from every single direction, from its repetitive, shallow-ass gameplay to its shitty jokes and its underwhelming story that is not nearly as interesting as I thought it was when I was 15, you're probably wondering why I insist on playing a game that I don't enjoy. And it's true, I have been shitting on this game from every direction. But I never actually said I don't enjoy it, now did I? The entire Borderlands series is just shoot a billion guys, do a billion damage per bullet, he gives you a million XP, he explodes into a billion money, there's also a billion guns. Oh, what's that? Your inventory is full? That's cool. Sell the guns to the vending machine and get a billion more monies, and grab the rest of the guns and sell them for a billion more money, and then you can afford a cooler gun that can shoot a billion more guys and a billion more experience and a trillion more guns and 7 octodecillion more monies and experience and badass dick shot points. It's shallow, it's repetitive, it's damn near mindless, but holy shit. Those numbers are just, oh, they're beautiful. And that's how Borderlands gets away with being a mediocre game in other respects. It just constantly chucks big numbers at you. It draws you in with the over-the-top flashy and loud sound effects and visuals. It's constant noise and stimulus. It really is like going to the casino. You just keep pushing the buttons and it keeps giving you the sound effects and the flashy lights, but instead of losing all your money, you're just losing $60 and several hours of your free time. It's addicting. These games are just so good at isolating the things that make your reptile brain just light up with those temporary happy chemicals, because number go up, which means game is more gooder. Every little thing you do in Borderlands is quantified and counts towards some kind of upgrade or reward, whether it's killing a billion of a specific enemy, or firing an astronomically large number of bullets, or collecting a lot of money, or dealing a huge amount of specific elemental damage, or killing with specific weapons, or running enemies over like it's GTA, or shooting boulders out of the air, picking up weapons, selling weapons, buying them back. For God's sakes, there's rewards for getting a lot of rewards. That's not a joke. I'm pretty sure somewhere in there's like something like that. There's some kind of quantification and reward for each and every one of those little things. You pump up those numbers and you earn more numbers, and those numbers just like pump up and get more numbers, and I fucked up the line, but you know what I mean. There are so many prizes for doing literally anything in these games, so no matter what you're doing, you're always given a perpetual, constant, and often artificial sense of achievement. Borderlands is cookie clicker with fancy graphics, which again is kind of what I said about The Witcher 3. But unlike Witcher, the instantaneity of guns and explosions versus swords, combined with the sheer saturation of big numbers, is another thing that makes my lizard brain go apeshit. Not to mention, there's like a vending machine around every other corner, so you don't even have to waste that much time walking all the way back to the merchant dude or whatever. And that's the other thing. Borderlands is full of long, shitty fetch quests where you have to walk back and forth around these big-ass ass maps just like Bitcher, but it also doesn't spend a lot of time in dialogue trees or cutscenes and shit. And I have to respect that, because even though the gameplay is shallow and repetitive, it is still 95% gameplay. It's kinda like Doritos. Go and look at the ingredients. None of this is actual food. These are just chemical compounds that have been extremely carefully isolated and balanced and refined to elicit certain chemical reactions in the brain. That's what Borderlands is. It's not real food. They just took the number go up reward system that every single game has in some way and just applied that to every single little piece of the game so that the number goes up constantly all the time for even the slightest reasons. Again, cookie clicker style. It is extremely artificial and probably not at all healthy, but sometimes you just want to eat fucking Doritos. But much like eating excessive amounts of Doritos, playing Borderlands for too long will make me feel like garbage, and while that may technically be true of a lot of games, the Borderlands burnout hits harder and faster than any other game I can think of. All that artificial brain blasting just kind of fries your dopamine receptors after extended periods of play. Borderlands is best played in increments and not for overly long periods of time, and can be part of a balanced diet as long as you also remember to fill your body with the good shit. I'm talking lean protein, I'm talking leafy green vegetables, you gotta get your vitamin C in there, and that riboflavin or whatever. It's the perfect example of how a game doesn't need to be good to be fun. The gameplay is not smart or strategic in any way, the story is average, the writing and dialogue is fucking Reddit tier, but it's flashy and full of numbers and loud noises and pretty graphics. It's not a piece of art, not even close. It's just Borderlands. It's a quick snack that you can just graze on whenever you feel down, and that's nice. All I'm saying is that it's not exactly a whole steak dinner. Instead, it feels a lot more like a very large bowl of appetizers. Hey, how you doing? It's me, Mario, but not the Nintendo Mario, the other Mario. I'm here to tell you that your toilet's fucking broke, but also to thank you for watching this video. Feel free to drop a like or a dislike if you're just a really big fan of Borderlands and your feelings were hurt by this video. Phantom Bino didn't mean nothing by it, he's just a guy with a lot of opinions, but the beauty of it is that you can shit on him in the comments. I mean, your toilet's out, so you gotta shit somewhere, right? But otherwise, thank you for watching this video, and be sure to tune in sometime next week when he makes a video on Wolfenstein or something. I don't know, he never tells me anything.